if you don't have the right people on your property team, you could be leaving tens of thousands of dollars or maybe more on the table. Hi, I'm Jared Krause.
And I'm Sam Powell. And we're the hosts of Property Pals Australia. And in this episode, which is actually part 1 of 2, because it went so long, we discuss who you need on your property team and why. So we'll be obviously covering a few different points, but why the accountant is the first person that you need on your team, and without the right accounting advice, you could be structuring your whole portfolio in a way that it really chokes your growth, right? And also the importance of an experienced solicitor and or conveyancer to help prevent you from buying a lemon, basically, and overpaying for any unforeseen fees that you really never knew existed.
Yeah, we also discussed why the mortgage broker could be the most important person on your team to not only be able to increase your borrowing capacity, but enhance your cash flow and provide the ability to keep you buying more properties in your portfolio, to keep scaling your portfolio. We also discussed why not all property managers are created equal, unfortunately,
Yes.
and why having the right one on your team will make your investment journey just far more enjoyable. Now, there's so much in this podcast episode, just in part 1 alone. You guys are absolutely going to love it, so let's dive in. Welcome to Property Pals, the podcast where we share everything around how to build a property portfolio, from researching areas, financing, structuring, buying, selling, and reinvesting to live a life of financial independence. As a disclaimer, any information shared by myself, Jared, Sam, and the Property Pals team is strictly general and should not be taken as constituting professional advice. You should consider seeking independent legal, financial, and taxation advice from a qualified professional. Cheers.
Chin, chin, chin. I'm recording.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Healthy tea in the morning.
All right, let's get in this pod.
Rightio.
So what are we talking about?
We're talking about your perfect team.
Oh, let's build a team,
Your
right?
property team, how to build it and why, and who you need, which is really important actually in this day and age. There's a lot of information out there, and I feel like people are getting a little bit clouded. There's a lot of savvy marketing people out there, marketing professionals who have very limited experience, and people are getting, up shit creek sometimes.
Yeah, it's scary. And I just, when you said team, I just remembered a mentor once shared with me a really good quote saying, if you don't have team, you don't have time. And meaning that a lot of people try and do a lot of the learning and education and investment, or try to do all the pieces of the puzzle themselves, really.
Yeah.
And I was taught that, if you want to do it right, you need to do it yourself and stuff like that. But I'm total opposite now. What are your thoughts? And I think that's probably a good thing to touch on, before we get into it, is the mindset of why use a professional versus trying to do it all yourself. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in regards to property, there's some people that you just need, we'll rattle a few things off, and they're things you can't do by yourself. So an accountant's very handy, and a mortgage broker, and solicitor and conveyancer. But when you're buying a property, you can do a few of those things yourself. It's just fraught with danger, and experience does teach a lot, right? So you can go and learn this whole new skill set on top of what you do every day for work, and that takes time. And then
A lot of time.
if you're transacting on property, generally people in Australia transact once every 10 years. So you're learning multiple whole new skill sets for one transaction that you're not going to do for another couple of years, or 10 years on average, right? So in that 10-year period, even in a 2 or 3 year period, the market's changed so much. Even the way that our technology is evolving so fast, you're going to have to relearn that whole skill set in a few years for the next purchase, right? So utilising skilled professionals who do it day in, day out, you're going to leverage that time and that experience, and you're going to reduce that risk.
Isn't it wild to think that sometimes, you want to have full control over the whole process at times.
It's
But
good to know parts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just think a lot of people. I ran into this, like, why would you use a buyer's agent, right? We'll touch on this through buyer's agent, but this is the same with any sort of expert that you can have on your team, and the same when I'm using people in business and on contractors, and why would you use them? Well, they've got 20 years dedicated to learning that. They're in it all day, every day, and if I'm plumbing as a full-time plumber, like I was, how am I going to stay on top and be better than these guys? Like,
Yeah,
and then you've got buying an investment property is a competitive landscape. So you're trying to play a game against you being the solo person, working it out, fumbling around, if I must say, when you try to do it yourself, versus somebody that's in it every day. Who's going to win?
Yeah, well, I can hands down say that, I'll win.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not being too, it's not egotistical, arrogant, all those words that people do say, but it's just when I'm in it day in, day out, I'm building relationships with agents in pockets. They know, like, and trust me, and they know they're going to get a deal done. If you're if you're a serious buyer, you're still entering into a market that you have very limited experience in. And I mean, we see it day in, day out where we're coaching people on how to work through this process, and often they get in their own way. And that's obviously understandable because there's a lot of people out there that have done wrong by people, so they're a bit burnt. But that's why we try and lead. We lead with education first because that's important, and then my whole goal generally, my philosophy is teach them how to fish.
Yes, that's exactly how I started.
And then it's for you to decide. Hey, do I want to go fishing? And based on what I've learned, is this fee going to pay for itself, and more so if I go down this path? And also, what's your time worth? So, in property, if we're in even a small growth period where it is rising, say 1% a month, that's still a strong property market. So that's growing 12% growth per year, right? On average, it sits around 6 to 8. I think the 30-year growth rate from CoreLogic was 6.8 that came out over the last 20 years. So, based on that too, if you're not transacting, say, if you're finance ready and you're ready to transact on a property in March, and you're waiting till September to find, to get that property, to build that confidence, that's 6 months of growth that you've missed out, which is tens of thousands of dollars, right?
Yes, really good point. Time is money.
Yeah, so let's. Okay, we keep doing this, don't we? We just keep rambling, but it's
that's valuable. It's valuable to think about because we may see it as rambling, we may know it, right? Because we've lived it for a while, but for people that are here listening, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that's 6 months of growth that you missed out on. It's so important. So, starting off with the property team,
yes.
Where do we go first? Let's go through the whole start to finish on who you need prior to transacting, and then also whilst you are going through the transaction, and then also after transaction. We may need to split this podcast into 2 episodes because it's going to be a beast. But first and foremost, it's going to be based on finances, right? Like you say, and everybody else says, property is a game of finance with a few properties thrown in the middle.
Yeah. Well, the first things is obviously we covered off getting all your budget in place in the previous podcast. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to those because that's obviously really important to get your financial house in order. And then the first one off the rank for me is an accountant. So we all need an accountant. We do tax returns every year. Generally, they're a trusted advisor in your household who has no beneficial interest to this transaction that you're about to go through. So they're a really good voice of, clarity when you're making those big financial life decisions like buying a property, whether it is an owner-occupier or an investment. I always like to refer to a really good accountant. Obviously, at the end of this whole process, we are connected with all these people involved. So if you have any questions or would like to be in contact with them, just reach out, and I'm more than happy to provide you with a few different options for you to have a chat with. But off the rank, have a good accountant because they're going to help you guide you best on your purchasing entity or structure, which we call it. So what I mean by that is are you buying this property in a trust, in a company, through your self-managed super, or in your personal name? Your accountant is the licensed professional who's going to be able to give you that guidance, which is really important.
Yeah, and we will have to get some of our team on here to chat with you guys and share, different parts of the process on purchasing. But with the accountant and the structuring, like we're gonna have to do another podcast on structuring, another full episode just on structuring to know whether you should buy in your personal name, buy in a trust, what that looks like for the future of the growth of your portfolio and how fast you can move, or how much it might slow you down if you choose the wrong structure. So accountant is the most vital step, and we're going to get to that in probably the next podcast after we do this 2-part series, I guess. And yeah, just accountant, make sure you've got a good one. If you want somebody that's really good with property, like we can share, our team as well. So
so that's number one. This is going to rattle through them and see where this process goes. But once you understand what entity and what structure you're buying in, that's when you go to your mortgage broker. Because that's the first question they're going to ask you, and that's going to also hinder
borrowing capacity.
Your borrowing capacity if it is through a company, a trust, or a personal entity, for example. Mortgage broker, very important, and it's very important to find a good mortgage broker.
It's like probably the most. Oh, I don't know. We'd have to weigh up what's more important: buyer's agent versus mortgage broker versus solicitor.
Even a property manager, they're really important too.
Yeah. So, mortgage broker, there's a few things that you need to do to select a good mortgage broker. And we'll get some mortgage brokers on.
Yeah. The people that we work with listen to this podcast and coming for you.
They're hungry to get on. They're just like, oh, what? Like, I need to come and chat.
Yeah, we all like sharing knowledge. But what I really want to try and cover with the mortgage broker, and Jared has been through a few himself, and that was because you've purchased through multiple different entities as well, so there's different specialists for different entities, and you can appreciate the quality that you deal with, right?
I think it's also really good to compare a couple, because your style might suit another. Like you might connect better with a different mortgage broker in your communication, and you got each. You're going to get a mortgage broker for commercial deals, you might go for a different one for resi, right?
Yep.
And that's pretty important. So what else are we looking for in a mortgage broker?
Well, I've got a few points in my head. So not all are created equal, obviously. In order to become a mortgage broker, it's a diploma certificate that might take a couple of months to complete. So the barrier to entry is not that high. As a mortgage broker, you have to sit under another licensed broker for 2 years once you get that qualification to get those experience. So I generally say to clients, look, they need to have at least 4 years experience because they've got enough knowledge at that point. And they've also been around for at least a few years because the industry, like the fallout rate generally happens within a few years. So minimum 4 years experience on that front. And it's really important to have them, as we're just talking about, experienced in your strategy. So if you're looking for a residential under your personal name, obviously there's a person for that. If it's under a trust structure, there's a person for that. Doing commercial, there's a person for that. So, and the reason why is that not one broker can be across multiple different loan products. I mean, there's thousands of different loan products out there, and generally they specialize in a certain few products with bank business development managers. So they've got those strong relationships to help get those good deals over the line in a quicker time. So they're really valuable, and they also have done it day in, day out. So they know what comes next, so they can coach you through that process, and it definitely eases your, anxiety when you're paying hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for a property, right?
Yeah, they basically babysit you through the process because they tell you this is what you need and when you need it and how you need to present it to us as a mortgage broker. They basically get all your stuff, and I'm saying stuff in air quotes here because with our finances, personal finances, it's everywhere. It's all over the shop typically for everyone. And yeah, they've got a pretty crazy job. They've got to get it all put together and presentable for the bank to go, yeah, this human's worth, and where they're at, we can lend to them. Also, I think the value in a mortgage broker, finance broker, is, I think you're crazy not to use one, because when you go, and if you're just going to go straight to the bank and try to do it all yourself, you're going to get pushed to the back of the queue in terms of getting pre-approval, versus a lender, a mortgage broker linking up with a lender that they speak to regularly. They can get it done in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
or less sometimes.
Diversity of products too. So if you go into a bank, I mean, I've worked for a bank, and they've got products, but they're not always the best products. And yeah, it's always good to shop around. And the mortgage broker, what makes them so great, and why their participation rate is rising dramatically. I think close to 90% of loans are now done through a mortgage broker. So
wow.
It's a free service for the client in that sense, because they get paid by the banks. So they take a commission on whatever loan right that they do. And there's a few different things about that people don't understand as well. So you got to be, people misunderstand the broker's position and the time and effort that goes into getting that loan across the line, because if you refinance and change to a different bank within 12 months, they get their commission clawed back, as you know. We'll talk about that one.
I smile and laugh, because I did not know this, and I was like, oh, I want a better deal. And I changed mortgage brokers, and I just had no idea. And my old mortgage broker called me up and was like, dude, what the hell? And I was very regretful. So that's a mistake on my part. Maybe a mistake, but also I did get a better deal somewhere else.
And that's also to say, well, that first one, I wasn't aware of who it was. But, I mean, it's a shame that happened to him, but at the same time, it's like, well, if you can be better at your job and build better service, and it wasn't just the rate, it was also the communication from memory. Yeah,
it was. And that's, when he called me up, he asked for my feedback, and I said, dude, I'm just going to give you straight up constructive criticism and constructive feedback, because that's what I ask from everybody in my business. Like, why are we crap? Like, why do we suck? Tell us, please. I really want to know so we can fix that. So I was just straight up with him, and he's like, yeah, through that process, the communication with somebody he did put on was not great at the time. And I just don't think they really understood. Like, I try to communicate my goals in how I wanted to grow my property portfolio for the long term. And they just wanted me to go with a big four bank for a good platform, which I understand, but it was also going to restrict me as well moving forwards in getting future lending. So that's a really, really important thing to get, is like, sometimes the brokers might communicate, yeah, I get where you're at and I'll do this for you. And then you get this loan product that's like, oh, wow, like that's going to hinder my borrowing capacity in the future for maybe property 3 or 4. Yeah, and so you obviously through the coaching process understood that, but Joe Public, I mean, they're so busy with their day-to-day lives, they don't think, they just go in, they expect every mortgage broker's the same, they turn their screen around and they see all the different products, and you get to maybe pick which one you want. But it doesn't just end there, because there's multiple different aggregators. So, it's just one of those things, as we talked about. You don't know what you don't know, so now you know. Now I know. Yeah, and I did feel bad. And he missed out on his commission, and they did a lot of work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it wasn't exactly the perfect fit for me too. So
so the general rule is first 12 months, if you refinance, they pull all their commission back from them. After 12 months, they pull half. After 2 years, they can't pull any of it. So, I always say it's always good to look at your mortgage rate every 12 months anyway, just to see if there's better deals. But if you are doing that within that 12-month period, it's good to go back to the broker that you initially went through and build that relationship with, because then they can get that commission on the refinance, so it's no real sweat off their back.
Yeah. And I think it's just worth every time. Like, this is what I've learnt with mortgage brokers, is every time I speak to them, it's worth me reiterating what my goals are because the amount of people that they deal with that have different goals is they just put us into a category of like, yep, cool, I get it. You want to buy a residential property. It's just the same, your cookie cutter approach. Every one size fits all. And I get what you're up to and I know what you need to do and I'm the expert here. So I'll do it how it's supposed to be done. And I think it's worth every time sometimes you might sound a bit like annoying, but if they don't really know where you're at, then they're not gonna do those nuanced changes or look at different things they could do in the strategy to set you up for the long term, thinking with the end in mind.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, like on average, probably like people that buy an investment property, they get to one. Like 95% of people get to
they don't get past one.
Don't get past one, right? So whilst everyone has these intentions, they say these things to them. They're also super busy at the moment. Most mortgage brokers are off their feet.
Well, it's crazy because through COVID, it was just slowed down so much because there was so much volume going through, and then also the amount of times that the rates had changed through 2022. Mortgage brokers, unfortunately, like having to fight so much to reassess each application.
Yeah,
so
and
crazy.
people are going, oh, my mortgage has gone up, 4%, and I'm like $900 a month extra, and what can I do? And people are, like good on them for actually standing up and saying, hey, I want a better rate, because you can negotiate your mortgage rate lower as well. And there's a YouTube video of me out there in the EOS somewhere talking about how you can negotiate them down. And if you don't want to get on the phone and call the bank yourself, you can go to your trusted broker and they can twiddle the back end, and that also saves you time as well. Just to mention that one, they can do their effort and it saves you maybe 2 hours on the phone.
Yeah, I actually literally did that 3 weeks ago. There was just my two properties that I've got. I was like, let's get this sorted. And I even, because I had settled on one, what
was that?
3 months ago?
Yeah,
I settled on one 3 months ago, and I was just cheeky, and I said to him, look, I don't know if it's too early to look at like asking for a better rate. And he's like, let's give it a go. And it wasn't much less. We got less, but it wasn't much less. I can't remember because there was two of them we did. Yeah.
That's always good, especially after that hiking cycle.
It was high though. It was still higher than
too high. It's always too high. Banks.
Well, I'm on interest only for both of those, so it's more than what people are paying P&I.
Yeah, and that's a strategy for Jared too. So, we'll talk about strategies in another session.
Yeah.
But interest only, principal interest, very common questions which we can break down. But in general, it came down to Jared's aggressive strategy because his risk tolerance is, given your age, is around that high level. So we're able to go hard and fast and need that extra bit of cash flow to accumulate through these younger years.
Yeah.
We'll touch base on that in a lot more depth. So
yeah.
I don't want to get sidetracked because mortgage brokers are really great. So I got accountant, mortgage brokers. The next one is a solicitor and conveyancer.
Yes.
Now, I kind of do feel sorry for some of them, the conveyancers and solicitors. Like, what's the difference? Well, solicitors obviously a licensed legal professional, and a conveyancer specialises in that contract law, property contract law. So for property transactions, all you really do need is a very experienced conveyancer on that front. But if they're a solicitor / conveyancer as well, it's best of both worlds. So
let's just talk about that elephant in the room. Solicitor, conveyancer. What's the difference? Like,
one's spent more time at university studying, but the experience, there was like a lot of solicitor companies, they have like a conveyancing section of their firm, and generally they have a conveyancer underneath them that does the legwork anyway.
So what does a conveyancer do, and what does a solicitor do? Well, what does a solicitor do that a conveyancer can't do, I should say, or ask?
Oh, geez, we should get a solicitor on, because I don't want to put words in their mouths.
Yeah,
but they generally do the same thing when it comes to a property transaction. It depends on their level of experience, and that's both solicitor and conveyancer, because they can put in, they know certain clauses that are important to put in a contract. And that's also with when you're doing deals as well. If you're doing it personally, you might, like one of the deals that we went through, there was a bit of time pressure that I put on the selling agent. And I did that in order to create that fear of loss of a potential purchase on this property, and we did a really fast transaction. It was over the weekend.
The settlement period was not.
The settlement period was really tight, but the initial...
My broker almost said, "You can piss off, mate. There's no way."
Yeah.
He's like, almost sent me to another broker. He was not happy, but we got a better deal because of it, so thanks.
Yeah, and the key clause in there was, basically the whole contract was null and void until a solicitor has looked over it.
Yeah.
And
so we had our ducks in a row.
So you had your get out clauses, and the agent had the seller that was just keen to move on it, and it was over the weekend, so we got that deal done, and that's another strategy for, I guess, another day.
Yeah, so many of them.
But it was really good, and we got an amazing price. I mean, I just did a little comparable, and in 3 months, it's lifted $60,000. So.
Yeah, so
woo, that was good. Yeah,
absolutely nailed that one.
But yeah, difference between those two, it's just experience for me personally. I always say, similar to a mortgage broker, you want at least 4 years experience from that front, and it also depends on what structure and what property you're purchasing. So having the experience in that that property type and that purchasing structure is really important. So you're interviewing them basically on your selection at that stage. And the reason why I'm saying I do feel sorry for them sometimes is because they're often used as a reactionary service. So people go and find a property, they go to contract, and then they go,
away. Help me.
"Oh, I need a solicitor conveyancer." There's a couple that I work with that's obviously they specialise in that. So the turnaround time is really quick, and it's all digital, so it's fantastic. But I'd like to at least give them a bit of a heads up to say, "Hey, I'm looking to buy a property, just giving a heads up, this is, what I'm looking at." So they're kind of anticipating it's coming through.
You're in their client portal, and they know,
And then when it does come through, they appreciate that you give them a heads up, so they're going to be more inclined to pick up your file and get it done if there is urgency on that front.
Yeah.
So that's why I say just reach out to and pick your solicitor and conveyancer so you can, act with speed.
I guess with the different regions and different states, it might be different who you might go with as well, right? I know that my property in WA, I just went with like a local there because I was told that that's probably the best way to go.
Yep.
But the other purchase, I went with I think they were specific to Queensland, or they have different people in their team that can do different areas. So why would you go with, I know the answer, but why would you go with somebody for a different area, for a different reason, for a different property?
Because they're doing the transactions in that state
with the laws
regularly, and the laws, they understand it. If you're getting your conveyancer who's based in Queensland to do your contract over in WA, they might miss certain state-based laws and clauses that they might not know about. So definitely try and find that, and that's also the hard part too. And when you're building out your team, having access to people who know where to point you in the right direction, if that makes sense, is really important. So conveyancers, solicitor, get them on your team, just give them a heads up, pick them before you pick your property. That's probably the tip. And then the other one that I want to talk about is a property manager.
Yes.
Why are they important?
Why are they important? Because they can make your life so much better.
Yes, especially when even in investing, right? So at the moment, or the past few years, there's been a big rise of utilising property managers, and they're starting to bring on business development managers for these property managers to these nationwide or these large scale buyers agents. So I've got a few connections with buyers agents in different local government areas around Australia, and they're really proactive and great. They want to bring on new service because they know that we can provide multiple property management opportunities for them. So they go in, they inspect the property for you. They provide feedback.
So they will inspect the property like when you're going through settlement.
They can do a pre-purchase inspection. So you say, "Hey, I'm interested in this property."
When they do a rental appraisal, right?
You send them in, give me a rental appraisal on this property and let me know your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
And there's a double-edged sword with that too.
Yes.
So
Just thinking of some biased agents,
yeah. Well,
property managers, just say.
it's in their best, like devil's advocate. It's in their best interest to say, "Yep, this property is great," because I don't want to go and inspect the 4 more for you, Jared.
Yeah.
I just want you to get this one done. So give me that listing and move on. And then the other side of the argument is, well, they don't want to inherit a lemon of a property with multiple issues, and also poor in a poor area that's going to have a high tenancy turnover or issues with tenants.
Yeah.
So
Also, I think about somebody if I'm going to buy a property, investment property that is in a different state, far away from me, and I get a rental appraisal from the property manager that's already managing the property, it's in their best interest as well to be like, yep, no, this is an awesome property. So you need to take some of the advice, like any advice, I guess, most advice, with a grain of salt. And also the rates for property managers. People, typically when we're starting out, we want to do things on the cheap, and I get it. But
pay peanuts, you get monkeys.
Yes, exactly. And with that, it can be a more frustrating process of owning a property if you don't have a good property manager, because you're not paying the best money, and they'll put more responsibility on you as the owner versus to them. And I prefer to pay more for a good property manager. So they send me an email, this has happened, I'm like, cool, sort it out. They've already got quotes from 3 different people when this plumbing thing needs to be fixed, and I don't need to have any brain capacity on what happens, because I've just factored that cost as a part of my maintenance as well.
That's what you're paying them for too.
Yeah,
every week. But they're a useful source. But similar, like there's a very high, like not all property managers are created equal. Probably what we should call this podcast. But there's a high turnover in property management. So it's a very I'd say difficult job.
What do you mean by high turnover? Do you mean that people
staff retention, people move on
in their actual agency, their property management agency, or do you mean that people that own the property decide to use a different manager more regularly?
No, generally the property managers
in their agency, they have high turnover of workers.
Yeah. They either
it's not the funnest job, is it?
It's difficult. I mean, I've got a few friends.
We love you guys, property managers. Thank you.
It's just like the commercial sense of it. Once again, it's a pretty low barrier to entry. So there's a lot of competition. That's why their fees are around that. At the moment, they're sort of range between 6 to 8%.
Yeah,
depends how hard you can negotiate. And that's another thing you can do with them is negotiate their fees down. But as Jared said, just be mindful of what you're actually sacrificing. Because if you negotiate too hard and screw them down, then they'll just say yes and put you in the books, and then they might not service you appropriately.
Imagine the way I think about that is like they're working for you, those property managers. Imagine if you run a business and you have an employee, and you go, "Hey, I'm paying you $100 an hour, but like, can we do it for 80?" Imagine their output on the tasks. They're going to be like, "Are you joking?"
Yeah, well, another negotiation tactic with the property managers is I get 3 different quotes from different property managers.
This is when you have about to settle on the property. Yeah.
About when you found a property, and you can say, or even if you've got a property under contract.
Or you could get 3 different rental appraisals prior to prior to putting an offer on.
Yeah, do it. I mean, with going back to the property managers can inspect your investment property, prior to purchasing it. I'm still a massive advocate for. You're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. You should fly there or drive there and see it yourself. To each their own. I'll leave it at that. But I mean, for the time and effort, I'd still personally go and do it.
Yeah.
There are people out there that advocate for just using property managers, and I mean, to each their own. You might have done it a few times and be more comfortable with it, but hey, I'll just leave it at that point because.
Yeah, everybody, you got to do what makes you feel good and happy.
Yeah, and I get it too. Like, you get a property valuer walking through there, you get a building and pest inspector, you get a property manager. the sales agent giving you the video walkthrough. The technology is fantastic these
It's
days.
amazing.
So,
Yeah. And that's thanks to COVID, people having to do that when buying property through COVID.
yeah.
Like there was, you're not inspecting properties through COVID.
I've got a business idea for everyone.
Guys, take it. We've got thousands of these things.
Put like VR goggles on, and you can actually imagine just walking through any property at any time, and you can inspect it yourself. It's a live thing. That'd be pretty cool.
Let's go prop tech. Realestate.com.au. Shout out to you guys. You guys got to get this thing sorted for us.
Yeah, but anyway, go back to product managers. Yeah, great source of knowledge, and because they're local to the area, they're very knowledgeable on what are the good pockets and what to look out for, and
market rates, current market rates.
And also by getting an experienced product manager who's been in it for multiple years, you're not going to have that risk of basically turnover. So just an example, one of the properties I purchased a few years back, I went through and found a really great property manager, and this is a lesson I learned too, and we were signed up to a 2-year agreement at the stage. The property manager was amazing, and she ended up getting poached from a different property management business, and because it was a 2-year agreement, so I'd say only try to sign up to at least a 12-month lease agreement with any one agency. So she got poached, she left. I was given a junior property manager to manage my business, and I found out later she was the admin girl who got promoted to my property.
Oh, no.
She was lovely, don't get me wrong.
But she hasn't got experience.
No, she doesn't have the experience. And then she left. So I went through 3 managers basically in a 18-month period, and at that stage I reached out to the initial manager that I'd interviewed and done all the work with, and it got to a point where she basically said, we negotiated, look, I've got 3 months less of this. If you pay out the fee that's involved with having leaving that one company and going to yours, I'll go with you. So they paid the fee out.
Great.
Well, basically they gave me 3 months free management, and then I paid the other bit out, and then move on. So
good on you.
Good lesson, but
and it's not your fault because you didn't know.
Well, yeah, you do all the things, but it's not the end of the world either. You just end up managing your manager more.
Well, that's right, and that's the thing why it's worth paying a manager. Like, you don't want to manage your manager, but also at the same, like, a good manager is going to have good communication with the person, the tenants, and that's going to stop. Like, a bad manager will be like, oh, they've said this, and they bring every time they bring what the tenant has said about the property to you, versus a good manager be like, they would know how to diffuse the situation and make sure that the tenant is happy without you having to ever be involved. Yeah.
So there's property managers for you.
Well, that is it for part 1 of this podcast series episode on who you actually need on your property team. In part 2, stay tuned for this because it's going to be super valuable. We're talking about buyer's agents. Do you actually need one? And if you do, how to do your DD on them and why it's important to do your DD on them, because there are a lot of rookies out there. We also talk about how to choose the right property valuer and why to use a property valuer to prevent overpaying for a deal. We also talk about the right building and pest inspector, how you can choose them. We also talk about a quantity surveyor and how they can save you money through tax depreciation. And then we move on to talking about using a town planner and an engineer. So there's so much value in part 2. You guys are going to absolutely love it. So stay tuned and we'll see you on that one soon.